Welcome to Patriots Pulse. I'm your host, John Serenitas. And as always, I'm joined by WEEI's John Lyons. Patriots with a 20-12 preseason win over the Minnesota Vikings. With the win, the Patriots improved to 2-0 on the preseason. And John, dare I say, we should probably start printing those Super Bowl tickets. The Patriots are 2-0 in the preseason.
Yeah, one of those, I don't know if I want to call it a weird preseason game, John, but I'm sitting there in the fourth quarter, and it just kind of felt like the first quarter was 3 days ago because it was such a different game early on to late. Because, again, I thought the Patriots offense, the first drive, they were kind of shaky. May had that bad overthrow of Demario Douglas. Henderson had the drop. But then second drive, they put it together after that. They had the touchdown run. But once things really stretched into that fourth quarter and the Patriots got into some situational football, some pretty big frustrations with that piece of it. And look, I know a lot of these guys are third, fourth string guys who might not make the team, but some frustrations, from me in those situational football aspects. So yeah, I guess maybe I'm not used to the afternoon preseason game either. They said on the
First
broadcast
one since 1997.
yeah, so it's been a while, right? So I guess maybe I'm not used to that. I'm not sure, but I think there were definitely some positives today, John. But you also walked away, much like those joint practices this week, with some distinct things for this team to work on.
Yeah, I texted you during the game and I said, what the hell are we going to talk about? I mean, first of all, it's really frustrating with these games, John, that both teams don't play their starters because since this new format with the preseason the last few years, the second preseason game has become the game when teams typically play their starters the most. Patriots played their starters a couple of series, pulled them. The Vikings didn't even play their starters. And to a degree, I get it if you're Kevin O'Connell. You saw everything you needed to see in those two joint practice days. But it's still frustrating nonetheless because for us in the media, ones versus ones is the barometer. With all due respect to the backups and the third stringers and the fourth stringers, it's really for us more about, okay, how did the Patriots starters do against the Vikings starters? And to not get that opportunity to see that is really frustrating. The other thing you mentioned, this being a day preseason game, as I said, first one since 1997. The last time Patriots played one of these were out in Denver. Scott Zolak talked about going 3 for 5 in that game or something. But I think that's the other part of this to me is like that was weird that they were playing a 1:00 game on a Saturday afternoon in the summer. You know that you're going to capture people all fall. Why not play that game tonight? What does it matter if you don't get home until tomorrow morning? They shouldn't be playing next Thursday regardless of when they played this game. I think that's ridiculous in itself. But overall, I agree with you. There was not a lot to take from this. Big point for me was obviously that opening drive looked good, then it stalled. The near interception by May sticks out. That second drive, they score on that tremendous run by Travion Henderson. And again, I know we've been pumping his tires all training camp long, but he's a dude, and he's going to be a dude. And he showed it on that run, scored on an old school boss play, back on strong safety for the touchdown. A lot to take out of that. Josh Dobbs, I thought they moved the ball fairly well when he was in the game. They obviously stalled. Of course, he eventually hits the great Efton Chisholm for the touchdown. But overall, let's be real here. The game sucked. There wasn't a lot you could take from it. That's all I really got out of it. The rest of it, you're just watching it to watch it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, sometimes the starters play more in the second preseason game, especially since the switch. And look, there's two reasons that you get a lot of starters sitting. One is the joint practices. The other, I mean, for the Patriots, there's 17 games. They don't have a bye week till what, mid to late November?
Yeah.
Like, you got to be careful with that stuff. And that's one of the things where I think the NFL...
Which I think is a valid point, by the way, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think that probably obviously factored into their decision-making in regards how to handle this.
And that's why you'll probably see no one play Thursday night against the Giants, too. And it's one of those things where, and this is a larger discussion, because as we know, the NFL is driven by money. If they were actually driven by player safety and what's good for the game, you would have a 16-week season with 2 bye weeks. So there'd be 18 weeks, but only 16 games. But that's never going to happen because they're driven primarily by money.
If anything, they're going to go the other way.
Yeah, if anything, there's going to be, 25 games, and we're going to be having the Super Bowl in April 1st, right? Eventually. So I trust me, we could do a whole nother show on that. I think
But I
the
think
seven.
we all agree they're going to get to a point
Yeah,
eventually where they're going to play at President's Day weekend. And I'm not opposed to that because, again, I mean, it is an unofficial holiday now, Super Bowl Sunday. You might as well do it and have people have the
I
next
wouldn't
day
even
off.
hate. Like you could still do 16 games, 2 bye weeks, and be playing around President's Day weekend. I think you'd have a much better product. But again, it's less money, so they're just not going to do that. But I think when it comes to this game today, and we can even loop in the joint practices this week because obviously a bunch of starters played in those, and I think when the starters played, you saw one team, and this is in the joint practices, one team won 14 games last year and is a Super Bowl contender, and the other one is on their way in their rebuild. So there were some moments, especially in the first joint practice, where the Patriots held their own, and there were other moments where they got kind of outclassed, especially in the second joint practice.
Yeah.
And then even today, right? Like I mentioned it earlier, the Patriots win the game, right? 20 to 20. It's good that they won, but you see some of those situational mistakes. End of the first half, multiple penalties on defense. Minnesota goes down the field. End of the second half, you have Wooldridge throwing the ball away instead of taking a sack. Then you have a penalty on offense. Defensively, you allow Minnesota to go right down the field. Even Duggar on the game sealing interception doesn't go down right away.
Right.
Like
Then he
it
gets
nearly
stripped.
fumbles. Right. So,
Yeah.
and that was almost a mirror image. If you remember last year against Buffalo, when Marte Mapu took the interception out of the end zone and got tackled at the one, like I had flashbacks. So
See, when I think back to that play, though, the only thing that I remember is Bill Cowher butchering his name during the halftime highlight. He
that's
called
true.
him like
So,
Marta Mapapapu. So
yeah,
that's
I
all I
guess
remember.
that's true too. But I think that's kind of what you saw is like the Patriots did good things in the joint practice. Some of the joint practices, they did some good things today, but you saw some of those things where it's like, okay, last week versus Washington, they looked really good. And you're like, wow, they're right on par with a team that went to the NFC Championship game. It felt like this week was a little bit more of a reality check where, hey, you're better than you were. You're on the right track, but there's still a gap here between you and this team across from you that's a real Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point too, John, about the joint practices because good or bad, that's what people are going to remember. They're going to remember that they held their own on Wednesday against a really good team, a team that won 14 games last year, and then they got basically dog walked day two, where the Vikings said, "Okay, we're done playing. We think we're the better team. We're going to flex our muscles and show it." And I was on with our good buddy Joe Murray last night, and I did say to Joe, I said, I think too much is being made about these joint practices. Let's not forget, to quote the great thespian of our time, Allen Iverson, we're talking about practice. I mean, that's let's not lose sight of that. We're talking about a practice. And I think sometimes, and look, I have nothing but the utmost respect for our local media, but some of the reaction was just absurd. I'm like, look, just pump the effing brakes, relax. It's just a practice. Okay, it's not like they game planned it. It's not like they went and it was scripted in terms of how the practice is going to run, what plays they were going to run, what defenses they were going to call. But again, it's not a game. I put a lot more stock into this preseason game, and going into it, I did think that their starters would play. But so much was put into that joint practice, specifically Thursdays. And I'm like, look, we got to take a chill pill here. Yeah, they looked bad. Guess what? That's a pretty good football team.
Yeah, and I would actually just building
got
off
that might be the best front in football, by the way. I don't think that's an exaggeration.
and I said this on EEI, and I'm curious to your opinion because I don't know if I overreacted or not, but I think this Vikings defense with that front and with Brian Flores coordinating it, I think that might be the best defense they're going to see all year. Regular season,
I
preseason.
would agree when you look at their schedule. Absolutely.
So again, the fact that they had some struggles, I wasn't surprised. Like Will Campbell giving up a sack to Jonathan Grenard, who had 12 last year, I'm not surprised. Now, am I disappointed that he gave up 3 to him? Yeah, like that's a problem, and that needs to be better. But it's this that's the again, I think that could end up being the best defense they see all year, regular season, preseason, joint practice, playoffs, if they make it, you name it. It's a really good defense led by arguably the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, him and Spagnuolo. You can flip a coin, whoever you like better. So I'm not shocked that they had some struggles. That being said, it was nice today, at least in those first couple drives, that those struggles in the joint practice didn't spiral into 2 really bad drives. Like I thought, again, May overthrew Douglas and Henderson had a drop on that first drive, and that was bad. Other than that, I thought the offense operated pretty well with that first group, especially that second drive and their run blocking. So it's nice that, again, they didn't let it spiral. They kind of bounced back a little bit. But again, as I said at the beginning of the show, one team is a real deal Super Bowl contender. The other team is in their rebuild. And you saw that there's a little bit of a gap there. Now, the Patriots did a hell of a lot better than last year when they practiced against the Eagles, the real deal Super Bowl contender. But you still saw a little bit of a gap there. And I think maybe too many of us are a little too high after that Washington joint practice and preseason game because the Patriots looked so good. And they did, and they deserved it, and they earned it. But this maybe might be closer to who, they really are.
Just a reminder out there, I know it's a beautiful Saturday, late afternoon in August. If you're watching, and we've got a few people watching here, and you want to jump in and share your thoughts on today's preseason game, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to jump on the chat and tell us what you think. Again, you can watch us live on Facebook, X, Twitch, and YouTube. So please feel free to jump on and share your thoughts. We would love to hear from you. Yeah, I think that was another big takeaway for me, John, is that this was almost like a little bit of a reality check for Patriot fans and the media alike, that, yes, they had a great week against Washington, blew their doors off in that preseason game. And it's not that you could debate who's better, Minnesota or Washington, but I think Washington was a better matchup for them. I think Minnesota, for where this team is right now, is a tougher matchup for them. And I think we saw that. All that being said, I think it was a reminder that this team still has a ways to go, that they're not anywhere near being a finished product in terms of being competitive. They've got a long way to go to get to that point. And again, it wasn't all bad, right? I mean, I thought that they did a really nice job on Wednesday. They held their own. Thursday obviously was a different story. But again, I think it just goes to show you, and in a way, if you're Mike Vrabel, and you and I know this, we both coached, in a way, you want what happened on Thursday because it makes you and your staff sit down, reevaluate what you're doing. What can we do to better position these guys to have success? What are some changes we need to make, both in terms of personnel, and we saw that Ben Brown starting today at left guard. Clearly, Jared Wilson, the speed is picked up now. The stakes are a little higher. Again, he's only a rookie. Keep that in mind. But maybe it's starting to catch up with him a little bit. And so we saw that this week. So you make that adjustment. I loved re-signing Ben Brown because of his versatility. Now he can play some guard for you. He starts at left guard. And look, as much as Will Campbell struggled in pass pro, and boy, did he struggle. And a lot of people are going to struggle against Grenard, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner. Inside, you got Hargrave and Allen. They added those two guys this offseason. A lot of people are going to struggle against that front. Like I said earlier, that might be the best defensive front in the league. All of that being said, you see Will Campbell today, though, he blocked his ass off in the run game. And that's why I'm okay with where Will Campbell is. He's got to improve as a pass blocker. And ultimately, and you and I have talked about this a bunch, John, ultimately he could end up at guard, but you see why. You're going to get a good football player out of this deal no matter where he ends up, because on game day he comes to play and his fundamentals are really good. He's got to obviously improve as a pass blocker.
You brought up the coaching staff, and I think a day like Thursday can be valuable for a good coaching staff. And you kind of alluded to this, but if you look at last year, not to just harp on last year, but remember that they would repeat mistakes, things would not get correct. I mean, they would turn the ball over and then in a similar situation, not have enough protection, turn it over again, right? Or how many times did they bring Jalen Polk into the wing to be a blocker and he gets steamrolled and they kept doing it? Like, but those are – but I think a staff like Vrabel's, and with McDaniels on there as well, things that happen on Thursday, they'll be able to correct and find some answers. It doesn't mean they'll solve every problem the Patriots have, but they'll be able to correct those things, much like you and I talked, where some of this pass protection stuff is going to come from May and McDaniels. McDaniels setting things up protection-wise, shifting protections, keeping backs in, and May getting the ball out quick, right? It's not all just going to be the development of Will Campbell or how does Garrett Bradbury hold up.
No, and I agree with you, not to cut you off there, John, but that's what it's being made to sound like, which is if Will Campbell is struggling, that's it. The entire offense is going to struggle, and that's not the case.
Yeah, and obviously, look, if he struggles,
position,
it'll hurt them.
Not the case.
But I think like last year, Vidarian Lowe struggled, DeMontre Jacobs struggled, and those guys aren't starting caliber players. but it felt like the Patriots very rarely schemed ways around that. I mean, how many times those guys left on islands last year
A
while they were
lot.
struggling?
A lot. They
Whereas,
were so poorly coached last year from a protection standpoint. Look, Scott Peters is with the Bengals now. He got another job. Good coach. I watched him coach in practice. Really good fundamental coach. But I thought schematically, and a lot of that is the offensive coordinator. And
yeah, I
not
thought that
trying
was
to,
more
trying
a
to throw
design
AVP.
thing.
Yeah, not trying to throw AVP under the bus. But to your point, a lot of it was coaching.
Yeah, and you talked so many times about being a 5-out offense, and they always wanted 5 guys in routes. Like, whereas McDaniels, I think, will do a better job adapting to that stuff because, there's going to be weeks where Will Campbell has a great game for 60 minutes. There's going to be other weeks where midway through the third quarter, he starts struggling in pass pro. I think McDaniels has the skills to adapt to that mid-game. There's going to be other weeks where they go in knowing, hey, this is going to be a tough matchup for Campbell right up front, and they'll have stuff built into the game plan for that. Whereas you didn't have that last year. You didn't have that a couple of years ago with Patricia, and even the Bill O'Brien year. I think you had the knowledge to do it, but you were just so bad at quarterback and other places you couldn't do a lot of that stuff then. So now I think you finally have that capability where the protection is not all going to be on just the 5 guys up front.
You saw a little bit of that today, too, with Travion Henderson chipping on one of the plays to help out Campbell. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that for sure. You are watching Patriots Pulse. I'm your host, John Saranitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, WEEI's John Lyons. And, hey, we tell people to join the show, and good friend Adam Glazier joins the show. Hey, guys, good day for preseason football. Adam, first things first, thanks for joining us, man. Always great to hear from you. Appreciate you, man. And, yeah, it's a beautiful day for preseason football. And again, look, Patriots win 20-12. Nobody gives a shit about that because at the end of the day, it's a preseason game. No one's going to remember this game a year from now. Never mind a year from now, probably 2 weeks from now. But the reality is, I think when you look at this big picture, John, it was a good week for them. Yeah, they got their asses kicked on Thursday. And, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, or at the very least, I would say it was a valuable week for
them. It was a valuable week. Look, Mike Vrabel and staff found out a lot about their football team. And to a degree, maybe this week also tempered some of their expectations of what they have. Because when you have a week like this, especially in practice like Thursday, and you know this, John, you go back as a staff and you sit down and you're like, I mean, think about it, right? We both have coached college football. You scrimmage somebody and you go into the scrimmage. You've had a good week of camp. You go into your first scrimmage and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And you lose the scrimmage, and you walk away going, all right, we came out of it healthy, but boy, we did not do this, and that well. We got to go back to the drawing board. So you sit down as a staff, and you start talking about, okay, what did we do well? What did we not do well? What guys popped? What guys were we high on that might not be ready to help us? They might not quite be ready for prime time. We might want to start repping player A and player B in their place and splitting reps. These are all conversations that they're going to have tomorrow morning where they're going to sit down as a staff and say, okay, and they've already done it, by the way. These are going to be expanded conversations, but they're going to sit down and they're going to take a big picture view of this week, and they're going to say, you know what? All right, Drake was a positive. He had a really good week. Travion continues to prove he's an elite level playmaker. Our pass rush was pretty good on Wednesday, not so good on Thursday. We weren't very good up front at all on Thursday. And the offensive line is going to be a separate meeting on its own. But at the end of the day, I think this was a productive week for them because now you could start to see the direction of this football team and where they're heading. And I think you're going to see some additional changes to what we saw this week.
Yeah, I mean, if I was on this staff walking away from this game, first thing I would say is, all right, we got to figure out ways to, help the protection out a little bit more, but also end of half execution. Like you saw that end of first half and end of second half today, they struggled. But see, that's something that
guarantee you Vrabel's going to hammer that home when they watch the film as a team.
Exactly. And that's something, and you know this, like every coaching staff works on that, but now they have tangible evidence that they need to do some more work on it and maybe some specific situation, like not just the 2-minute offense. I thought the Patriots 4-minute offense at the end of the second half was really bad. And that's something that they tangibly can work on. So I think, again, that's where it can, something like that can be productive, where you can now say, hey, we have 3 weeks until opening day against the Raiders. We need to make sure, we have a bunch of things, but we need to make sure we get these 3 things right between now and then to increase our chances of beating the Raiders. So again, that's something, and that's why I said before, a good staff like this should be able to take that stuff. And now when we watch them Thursday against the Giants, but especially when we watch them the first couple weeks of the regular season, I think you'll see, if it's not perfect, obviously, some tangible improvement from where it was today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, that's what good staffs do. And keep in mind, I also think that's what staffs that have worked together do. That was a big problem with that staff last year, particularly on offense, where those guys had no history together. I mean, a couple of them did, but not all of them. And I think that the hodgepodge nature of how that staff was put together, and it's not a knock on Elliott Wolf or Mayo, it's reality. Mayo was relying on Wolf's Rolodex. I think that early on, you could see that they weren't on the same page when it came to making the necessary changes. These guys have coached together, especially on the defensive side of the ball. McDaniels gets Vrabel. He was here as a coach when he played here. He understands him. He's going to know what he wants. I do think you're going to see the necessary changes. And despite how bad the offensive line has been in recent years, I still believe, John, that they're going to be much better this year. They're going to play better. Sure, they're going to have their moments. They're going to suck sometimes. Look, I hate to tell you, I'm going to give you your weekly reminder, folks. The other team practices too. The other team is coached as well. So let's keep that in mind. Let's not, as soon as Will Campbell gives up his first sack during the regular season, let's not be ready to extradite him to bad offensive lineman island. I mean, he's going to have growing pains. That's just the reality of being a rookie in any professional sports league. But I do think they're going to be better. Adam checks back in. Henderson is going to be really good. Yeah. I mean, he's going to be very good. And I think after today,
John,
he's going to put more pressure on them to play him even more now as we go into the regular season.
And I don't know if you saw the interview Josh McDaniels did in game with the broadcast booth, but he said there's not a lot of negatives when it comes to Henderson. And I don't want to make this direct comparison because I think it's unfair to James White. I'm starting to see a lot of James White in him, in that he's good in the pass game. He's a good athlete. He's a good pass protector. He can run in between the tackles. We saw with the touchdown run today. But obviously the speed element with Henderson is a lot different than, and not that White wasn't fast, but Henderson has a different
and the pass protection element. I mean, he is elite in terms of pass
and so but see, White was a guy that you could play on all three down, and they usually didn't have to because they had Sony Michel or they had other guys. You different, Rex Burkhead too. Henderson, I think I was originally thinking Halloween. By early October, this dude might be your starting running back. I mean, that's how good he is. Maybe earlier.
Wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be either. And it's not just the kick return stuff and the speed and all that. It's like that touchdown run today, to me, was a really important step for him becoming a starter. And I know it's not as exciting as the 100-yard kick return or the catches that he has, but if he can do that and just go between the tackles and run and break a tackle if needed and get into the end zone or just gain yardage, then you're not just a third down back, right? If you can do that and you can pass protect, now you can be on the field on all three downs. So
there's no doubt about that. He's a starting caliber running back.
I think so.
Another guy, a third down running back.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another guy too that's worth mentioning that has been impressive, especially over the last couple of weeks, Efton Chisholm.
Hold on. I was going to give him his own segment.
Okay.
So let's transition to that. It is now time for the obligatory Efton Chisholm weekly tongue bathing that we've seen here in New England the last few weeks. John and I are fans. We're in the club.
He's a combination of Troy Brown, Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman, Jacoby Myers.
Although your Jacoby Myers comp elicited quite the response on X. I see what you were going for there, by the way, but people didn't agree.
Well, I think when I compare him to Jacoby Myers, it's more big, strong guys that I think can block pretty well, but that do a good job just kind of finding space, especially against zone. Now, what Chisholm is, I think, might even be a little better than Myers, is when he's going against man coverage, he's got the strength, especially the bulk in his torso, that guys aren't going to really get the ball away from him in a tight throwing window. I'm not saying Myers wasn't good at that, but I think Chisholm might be a little better. But that was, you go back to Jacoby Myers, college quarterback, had a really good feel for identifying zones and just finding ways to get open. You feel that a little bit with Chisholm. Now, again, Chisholm's faster than him. I think it feels like he's a little bit bulkier in his torso too, which is good against man. But I do see a lot of similarities between those two guys, and also how they could kind of fit into the offense, right? Like Myers came up, he was undrafted as well. Maybe he was late round draft pick, but he came up and he kind of worked his way into the
He was
offense.
undrafted.
Yeah, and worked his way in. And then Chisholm, I think, could follow a very similar path to him and just kind of, we like him now. During the season, he might not get on the field too much, but by later in the season, next year or the year after, all of a sudden, he's playing a decent amount of snaps and contributing.
It's interesting, John, because we do, and just watching and listening to people on X, I mean, everybody was on Efton Chisholm. Now, keep in mind, in fairness, I didn't watch him play in college. I watched him play in the pre-draft process on film, but I did not watch him play live on television in a game or obviously in person. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm some Efton Chisholm aficionado. All of that being said, he's going to make this football team. I think today, in many ways, solidified that for him.
I think he's wide receiver 6 right now.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. If nothing else, now what this does for the Patriots is it puts and I hate saying this because I've covered him for the last 3 years, and I really enjoy covering him and being around him because I think he's a special person. But I think that this puts Kendrick Bourne in a tough spot.
I agree.
KB is a pro's pro, but I agree. I think it puts him in a tough spot now.
Yeah, and it's like the only way I think Bourne makes the roster is if they keep 7 receivers and McDaniel specifically wants him because he's been out so much. He's a little bit older than, like even than Baker, right? He's older than Baker. So I think the only way he makes this roster again is if they decide to keep 7 and McDaniel specifically wants him. And it's too bad because he's been a good player for them. I thought in
very good for them in 21. Yeah.
21, he had 800 yards receiving. I thought he got screwed over in 2022 by Patricia and Judge, and they just put him in the doghouse because it was one meeting he was late to or something. Like he was their best receiver, and they just put him in the doghouse. 23, he was on his way to a career high in receiving yards before he tore the ACL. Last year was kind of a all over the place offense, as we know. So it feels like since 21, he's never really gotten a fully fair shot here. And it's just unfortunate because he's the type of guy you would really like to see succeed.
Yeah, and that's just it. And like I said, he's a pleasure to cover. He's just a great dude. It's great to be around, always positive, great energy. But in the end, and he knows this. I think if you ask KB, he would tell you that it's a business. He knows it's a business. He knows that it's a bottom line business. And your best ability is your availability. And if you're not on the practice field, if you're not playing in games, sadly, and I hate putting it in these terms, you're of no use to your team. And so I think at the end of the day, right now, if Efton Chisholm makes this team, and I'd be shocked if he didn't, because let's be honest, you're not sneaking him onto the practice squad. Someone's going to pick him up along the way. Someone could pluck him off your practice squad. I think if you want to hold on to him and develop him, he's going to need to be on your roster the entire year. Now, the problem with that is you're not going to carry 6 receivers every week. So that's something to keep an eye on. But going back to Chisholm, when we talk about comps, it's very easy in this area to say, oh, Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, Wes Welker. Obviously, those were your white slots that came before Efton Chisholm.
Yeah, you wonder where people come up with that comparison.
Right, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
When I look at Efton Chisholm, I'm going to give you a guy who actually played here for a small amount of time. And then I'm going to give you another name of a guy who's been an all-pro the last few years, and he currently plays for the Seattle Seahawks. I see a lot of Cooper Kupp there. Not as strong, but very similar in terms of the route running and the yards after the catch ability, and then the contact balance and breaking tackles. But another guy that he reminds me of, a la a Cooper Kupp, is Austin Collie. If you remember, he played here for a year. He's a guy, he's a guy that I see a lot of in Efton Chisholm. I see a lot of Austin Collie, really good route runner, knows how to play in space, strong with the ball after the catch, can push the pile and extend plays. He's not a guy that's going to break it in the open and finish. He doesn't have that elite level second gear, but he's a guy that you look on the stat sheet at halftime and he's got 5 catches for 82 yards and a touchdown. You look at the stat sheet at the end of the game and he's got 8 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown. So my point is, he's just going to be one of those guys that he's going to be more than a slot receiver. He is a true Z. He can play that flanker. He can even, with as strong as he plays, John, he can even play the X in certain packages for you. So for me, I think he's more than a slot guy. I think he's more in the mold of an Austin Collie Cooper Kupp, where he can really work the middle of the field. He plays strong after the catch. He's a guy that is just a consummate pro. He's reliable. I think he's going to be in this league for a while. He may never be a starting caliber receiver. All he may be is a third receiver in 11 personnel, but he's going to be productive enough to carve out a career for himself.
And that has value, right? And I could even see, like, if they go 12 personnel and they want to go big, it's like him and Mac Hollins or him and Kayshawn.
And we say big, by the way, John, but you've been at camp. He's not that big in person.
No, when I say big, I'm talking more like torso, blocking strength, play strength. Not, again, Hollins 6'4". That's big, right? I'm talking play strength. But like you mentioned, yards after catch and with the ball in his hands. Look at the touchdown he scored, because that was a scenario. You look at how that series played out. Patriots have a 6-yard run on first down. Then they immediately have a penalty. Then Javon Baker lets a pass go through his hands along the sideline. So I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is like a 2024.
Bad throw by Dobbs, too. I mean, he overthrows him on a window shot.
And I'm thinking, wow, this is a 2024 Patriot sequence right here. And then Chisholm, again, catches a ball in traffic, breaks tackles, and scores. So that is really valuable, because there's going to be moments like that in the regular season that you're going to be in a bad spot and you need somebody to bail you out a little bit. And that's exactly what he did on his touchdown. They had gone backwards. They weren't they were in field goal range, but they weren't in a good spot, and he bailed them out. And that's something that they haven't done stuff like that since 2021, like been able to bail out bad situations. They haven't really done it well since 2018, but they haven't done it in 4 years now. So it's nice to see him able to kind of bail them out a little bit of a bad spot.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, look, he's going to make this football team. I think the dilemma for Mike Vrabel, Elliott Wolf, and the coaching staff is going to be, okay, he makes the team as a sixth receiver, but it's going to be hard, man, because this is also a team that's going to need to carry 3 tight ends. And I wonder, more than likely, Jack Westover is your third tight end because he can play some fullback. You got to carry that guy. Where I think they're going to make up the differences, John, I can see them legitimately only carrying 3 backs.
And building off that, like right now, their starting kick returners are Gibson and Henderson. If Henderson starts to carve out a large role for himself on offense, maybe that's a spot where you put Gibson and Chisholm and try to have those and get Chisholm some experience returning kicks. Because, as
Julian Edelman, that's how he ended up finding a way on the field.
And we've talked about this at training camp, and some of the Patriots coaches have kind of alluded to this. The way the rules are now set up, that kick return play is almost like an elongated running play. Yeah. And you look at Chisholm's play strength and with the ball in his hands, that might be a nice fit for him there. So again, I like, it's almost kind of, it's partly due to Henderson. Like if he keeps getting that larger role on offense, I don't think you'll want him out there returning kicks all the time. So maybe that opens a spot for the 6th wide receiver in Chisholm to also return some kicks. And then it'll allow you to only keep 3 running backs because Henderson isn't going to be on kick returns, just on offense. Like that's kind of how all those moving parts maybe could fit together.
Yeah, because when you look at a potential roster here, and obviously we've got the next couple of weeks to figure that out, you're going to have to carry 8 offensive linemen, and you're going to have to carry 3 tight ends. And now, based on Chisholm's performance, and remember, he had a good spring. He got out of the gates a little slow in training camp. Then he really picked it up week 2 and beyond. But he's forced your hand enough now that you're going to have to carry 6 receivers. So, and more than like, I don't see them carrying 3 quarterbacks per se, but you can now with the emergency quarterback rule. But all of that being said, I do think it's a situation where Chisholm has forced their hand enough now that they're going to have to reevaluate how they want to construct the rest of the roster, really, because to a degree, him making this team could also impact the defense in terms of one of those positions potentially losing a roster spot. Before we wrap it up here again, the Patriots are going to play again on Thursday night, short turnaround, Thursday night at MetLife Stadium against the New York Giants in their annual preseason game. That game, I believe, is going to be on Prime. I'm sure it'll be carried locally, but it's going to be on Prime. Final thoughts on today before we move on to Thursday.
One last piece, and we haven't talked about him too much. Kyle Duggar. It looks like second team safety now. He was playing like obviously to the very end of the game. He had that interception in the end zone. Like you mentioned, Chisholm kind of maybe forcing them to mess around with the roster and how they get to 53. I wonder if Duggar's another guy like that because I feel like he's too good a player to outright cut. But I think he's clearly the fourth safety right now. So do they try to find a way to get him some snaps almost at
You
off the
brought
ball?
up a good point about Adrian Phillips.
Yeah, get him some snaps at off the ball linebacker next to Spillane, much like they used to do with Adrian Phillips. And he's kind of a similar body type. And you know this, he's always been better as a box safety, especially against the
You
run
saw it today.
from the time they drafted him in 2020, right? He's plateaued as a pass defender, and he really wasn't very good in that area last year, to be honest. So I wonder if that's something. But then if you have Duggar playing snaps at linebacker, does that allow you to maybe move on from one other linebacker and then you can keep whether it's a fourth running back or what? Like that's just kind of how all these things, as we said, fit together. But he's another guy that going into practice this week, that preseason game against the Giants, I've got a close eye on this guy. They paid a lot of money to a year ago, was a second round pick in 2020. And again, I do think he's too good to straight up cut, but I don't think he's better than Peppers. I don't think he's better than Jalen Hawkins. And I don't think he's better than Craig Woodson, at least long term, if not right now. So it's like, I wonder if they can try to find a place for him, and maybe it's exclusively kind of just working in the box.
It's interesting because when you compare him to those guys, I almost think it's not that he's not better than them, in my opinion. I just don't think he's a scheme fit. I think in this defense, where those safeties have to be more cover guys and they have to be able to either match up screwing down and carrying a receiver vertically or playing over the top. That's not his game, to your point. His game is to screw down, be the eighth guy in the box, support the run, use him in the pressure game. That's where he's at his best. You do bring up a good point. He's too good a player to cut, but the problem is he's also too expensive to trade. So you're going to have to eat some money if you decide to trade him, and you're going to have to take 50 cents on the dollar because no one, even if there is a team out there that says, okay, you know what, we think Kyle Duggar schematically could be a really good fit for us, they're going to look at his contract and say, yeah, we're not paying that.
Yeah,
so you're going to have to eat some money, and you're going to have to take 50 cents on the dollar because we have the leverage here. You have no leverage because you're looking to move on from the player. So he's in that could potentially be traded category, and I would put Kendrick Bourne and Anthony Jennings.
Yeah,
I'd put those guys.
I was just going to mention Jennings. Like Jennings to me is another one. He's too good a football player to cut. I mean, you saw him dominating today, and that's great.
I wouldn't cut him. I'd hold on to him.
And I think
they're not so good at edge, John, that they can cut him. And not in my opinion. He's another one though that's not a scheme fit. That's the issue here.
And I hear you on that, but I think part of being a good coaching staff is, you have this scheme, but you have two guys that are good enough football players. Find a way to make them fit, or find a way to use them, or work to their strengths within their scheme. Because I agree with you. As much as I like Keon White, and Harold Landry's been pretty good this spring and summer, so is Chason. It's not like we're talking about this elite, edge group. Like Jennings can certainly fit in that group and be part of it, and much like Duggar somehow in the front seven. So again, I think those are two guys I'm going to have an eye on this next week or two.
Well, I think it's interesting too with Jennings because I think you almost, if you do hold on to him, you have to go back and use him the way Belichick used him, which play him on the ball, play him off the ball. And he's obviously going to be a core special teamer, but you've got to use him that way if you're going to hold on to him. He can't just be a straight up, put his hand in the dirt, tilt 5 and cut him loose and let him go rush the passer. That's not his game. He's better in a 2-point stance. He's versatile in that he can play on the ball, off the ball. You can use him in the pressure game. There's a lot of different things you can do with an Anthony Jennings. And for that reason alone, in my opinion, I think he should make this team. But again, they're going to have some hard decisions to make. Now, I will say, I think when you look at edge/defensive end, Braden Swinson is not ready to play right now. He needs to marinate on the practice squad for this year, and he needs to get more and more snaps as the year goes on. But I don't think he's ready to be that fourth guy off the edge. So with that being said, that can be Anthony Jennings. When you think about who you're going to carry at defensive end/edge, that could be that guy make realistically speaking, John, I don't see them carrying more than three guys inside at linebacker. And quite frankly, right now, if they had to make cuts by tomorrow, I would say that the three guys are probably Spillane, Ellison, Gibbons.
Or Duggar, right? Depending on how they want to.
Well, then Mapu's another guy that's in that
Yeah.
boat. He's been a non-factor in this camp. He's another guy that's that hybrid safety linebacker.
Yeah, so it's something you and I have talked about. We talked about it last week too, kind of where they're at in their rebuild, right? Like they have these quality starters, like Spillane, quality starter at linebacker, but then beyond him, you're like, oh, what do we really have here? Or they have Milton Williams and Barmore, quality starters. Beyond that, I mean, there's some guys have shown flash, but what do you really have there? Like, so that again, it speaks to kind of where they're at in this rebuild and what are the young players they believe in. Like you brought up Braden Swinson. I think that's a great guy to bring up because last year at LSU he played more snaps than the previous 2 years combined. I think he's a guy that you want on your team. If you try to get him to the practice squad, does someone see the potential and claim him? And do you risk that? And that's something that they're going to have to think about because they have so many young players that they are expecting to contribute this year, but also next year. And some of them are going to be here and ready to go this year, whether it's Henderson, Campbell, May, whatever. But some of them are going to be guys like a Swinson that you kind of have to keep, but with 2026 in mind instead of 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a player like him is going to make an impact for him this year.
I agree. Yeah.
I think he's more of an impact player 26 and beyond. But I still think at the end of the day, John, they're going to have some hard choices to make here on a Duggar, on a Jennings, on a Bourne. These are not going to be easy decisions. And I think they're going to do their due diligence in the trade market. They're going to put them out there. They're going to see what teams are willing to give them for them. And they're going to go from there. I still think you could see a Kendrick Bourne San Francisco 49ers reunion because San Francisco's wide receiver situation is a mess right now. It would make a lot of sense. He knows the system. You can trade him back there, get a late day 3 pick, so you have an extra pick to play with next spring. And now you free up a roster spot for an Efton Chisholm, or even if you want to, let's say, keep a Polk or a Baker. But even a guy like Polk, and again, it makes me sick to my stomach. I don't want to be over the top with this, but it makes me sick to my stomach. And by the way, we were supposed to end the show about 15 minutes ago. But it makes me sick to my stomach that they're going to give up on a second-round pick a year later.
But as
he's in that boat too.
He's been, and I'm not trying to be unkind here, John, but he's been invisible this summer. Like you and I were at camp. I can't think of one real impact play he made when I was there. He hasn't had an impact in the preseason games. He doesn't block that well in the run game. So I know I agree that it sucks that they have to give up on a second-round pick so quickly, but you talk about the receiver group. He hasn't shown me more than Efton Chisholm or Mac Hollins or Kayshon Boutte. Like all those guys
or
are
Baker.
All those guys. And Baker himself might not even make it, and he's still ahead of Polk.
And he's playing special teams, and Vrabel likes him, and he's trying to do everything he can to make the team.
Yeah, so it's just that's the thing. Like a guy like I don't know what he's done to justify keeping him when they cut the roster to 53 guys. I haven't. And maybe that'll change over the next week, but I personally have not seen any evidence. I
think he's a guy though that you can sneak onto the practice squad.
And I also
think he's a guy that I'm sure they're going to dangle him out there to see if they can get anything. And again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I say this every spring with the draft. All it takes is one front office executive to say, I really liked him at Washington. I really liked him in that draft. New England beat us to him. Yeah, what do you want for him? We're willing to offer you this. Now, again, he's another guy that's probably you're going to end up having to take 50 cents on the dollar. He's not going to garner any real interest, and you're not going to get a real return. I do think, though, the veteran piece of this is going to be fascinating the next couple of weeks and worth keeping an eye on, especially Duggar's situation, because traditionally the Patriots don't like to eat money. They don't like to eat money and take money back. So if, in fact, they look at him and say, you know what, we just don't think there's a place for him here, and it'd be nice to get the rest of that contract off the books, we're going to have to do something we hate doing, but we're going to have to eat some of his money. They have the cap space to do it. And if Vrabel's ever going to convince Robert Kraft to fully do what he wants, this is the year to do it, because depending on how this year goes, it could potentially get harder down the road. So I think they're going to look at this objectively and say, if we can move off of this contract now, we're going to do it. And that's why ultimately I don't see Duggar on this team in 2 weeks. I would be surprised. I think there's going to be enough interest in him out there that as long as they're willing to eat some of that money, they're going to be able to move that contract.
Yeah, and I think it's a great story to watch over the next couple of weeks because there's a lot of directions it could go. It could end with him being a linebacker next to Spillane. It could end with him being traded. It could end with him being outright cut. It could end with him being kept as the fourth safety, right? Like I think there's a lot of different directions this Duggar thing could go. And you are the money component is a big part of it. They can afford it. Like regardless of whatever path they take, they can afford it cap space wise, real money wise. So we'll see if they use that as an excuse in some way, as an impediment to not do something. But yeah, I mean, that's a story like that has a lot of different outcomes. And I don't think we know yet. I mean, him playing in the fourth quarter today was not a good sign for him and what they think of, and we know that, right?
Yeah.
But was that not a good sign for how they feel about him at safety specifically, or how they feel about him on their roster overall? Like, I think, again, it's something
I think for the past week, John, they've told us that they're not. They're not.
I don't think they're high on him at safety.
They're not high at him. No. Yeah. No, and you've seen it the last week or so where he was getting second and third team reps. So I think that they've pretty much told us what they think of him in terms of his standing with the team and how he fits into this scheme. They just don't see the fit. And that's why I think ultimately, again, and you could end up having a run of injuries this weekend where a team does need another safety or depth at safety. So I think there's going to be enough interest in him that ultimately they're going to be able to move him. But yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that we pretty much have our answer. Look, Vrabel's done a really good job this week out in Minnesota of kind of tap dancing around the Duggar situation. And he's applauded him. He has said all the right things. That's what I mean by tap dancing. I'm not implying that Vrabel's not answering questions. One thing we know about Mike Vrabel, he loves the back and forth with the media. We saw it with Phil Perry the other day, who, by the way, is a consummate pros pro. But Vrabel went back and forth with him. He put him on blast. That's just what he does. All that being said, I mean, I think to me, he basically told us, look, we like the person. We like the player. We just don't know if the player's done enough to be here. Translation, he hasn't done enough to be here. If they can move on, they will.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that I don't know if they will have a fit for him, and same thing goes with Jennings. I just think, again, two guys that are too good to outright cut, but it's clear, like especially at safety, I feel like especially for their scheme, they have better options. So can they figure out a way to use him? Same thing with Jennings. Can they figure out a way? Because again, especially like it's not like we're sitting here talking about the Eagles defense that's loaded, right? Like it's a good defense, and I think the Patriots will have a good defense, but I don't think they're at a point to just cut good football play. Like, you know what I mean? Like they should find a place for them if they can. But I think you bring up good points. It's tough. Like you don't want to force the square peg into the round hole either. So they gotta figure it. I think they've shown us they're not super high on either guy right now based off the way they've distributed reps in practice and the way they've distributed reps in the preseason games. But I would not like to see those guys outright cut.
Look, this defense is predicated on speed, explosiveness, resetting the line of scrimmage, getting to the quarterback. They don't, and you got to be able to cover on the back end because they're going to play even more man coverage than they have the last few years. All that being said, that's where these guys don't fit in. And look, I'm going to say something, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Vrabel, the coaching staff. Those guys were also integral parts of back-to-back 4-13 teams. And they're going to be guys that are going to make this team that were also on those teams. My point is, if they don't fit the scheme, if they were a part of a culture that you're trying to reset, well,
and I also think like on that point, not only was Duggar a part of, and I do think, again, as I said, I think he's too good to just outright cut, but he was on a 4-13 team last year and he did not play well, like especially in pass coverage. So it's not like he was out there as an all-pro like Christian Gonzalez and the team was bad. Like he didn't play well either. So he didn't help his case last year.
And let's face it, his contract on Wendu's contracts, those were overpays.
Yeah.
Now, in hindsight, it's always 20/20 in anything in life. but those were overpays.
Yeah.
We can now say that officially that the Patriots, Wolf looked at that market, thought, man, these guys are going to generate some interest. We don't want them being out there too long. We're going to have to pay a little above what we want to, and then we're going to have to live with it. But at the end of the day, they were both overpays, and when the player doesn't produce, that becomes problematic when he doesn't play to his contract. All right, John, great stuff as always, my friend. Always great talking Patriots football with you. We'll be back again on Thursday night after the Giants preseason game to not only wrap up that game, and I'm not sure there's going to be a ton to talk about in that game, but we're going to wrap up the preseason, and we're going to take a stab at a final 53-man roster, who we think makes it, who we think doesn't ultimately. We gave you a little bit of a taste of that today. We hope to give you more of a taste of that on Thursday night. But, John, great stuff. And as always, make sure you follow John on X and make sure that you're catching him when he's on WEI. He is the ultimate role player at EI. I mean, he works every shift under the sun. And I think, and I don't say this because he's my partner, I truly, genuinely believe he's one of the most talented members of the Boston media. So make sure you catch him on WEI.
Appreciate that, John. And looking forward to Thursday night because, again, we'll see what actually happens in that preseason game on a short week. But now, once Thursday's over, I mean, we're going to be kind of switching into regular season mode here and cutting the roster down and getting ready for the Raiders. So it should be a lot to dive into Thursday night.
Absolutely. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Patriots Pulse. For John, I'm John. Till Thursday night, be happy, be safe. Peace.